You've done it. Maybe not with a stranger, with someone close. They lied to you once, and you forgave it. They lied again, and you found a reason. A third time, and somehow, you were still there, still believing the next thing they said. If you stood outside that situation and looked at it clearly, it would look almost irrational. Why would anyone keep extending trust to someone who has already shown you, multiple times, that they will break it? But here's what nobody tells you about trust. It was never really built to track honesty. It was built to track something else entirely, something much older, and much harder to override. Let's start with what trust actually is, because most people get this wrong. Trust isn't a rational assessment of someone's track record. If it were, one lie would be enough to end it. Trust is closer to a survival prediction. Your brain isn't asking, has this person been honest? It's asking a deeper, older question. Is this person still part of my safety? That distinction changes everything. Researchers who study attachment have found that once someone becomes part of your inner circle, your brain doesn't process their behavior the same way it processes a stranger's behavior. A stranger lying to you is a single data point. Someone you're attached to lying to you gets filtered through an entirely different system, one built around bonding, not accuracy. Think about the last time someone you trusted lied to you. Your first reaction probably wasn't to immediately cut them off. Your first reaction was confusion, a gap between who you thought they were and what they just did. Your brain couldn't reconcile the information, so it looked for a way to make sense of it. Maybe they had a good reason. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't really a lie. That's your attachment system doing its job. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. That system evolved for a very good reason. For most of human history, your survival depended on a small number of relationships, a partner, a family member, a close ally in your group. If your brain treated every lie from these people as a reason to sever the bond, you would have spent prehistoric life constantly isolated, moving from group to group, unable to build the kind of long-term alliances that kept you alive. So your brain develops something researchers call motivated reasoning. When someone you're attached to does something that threatens the relationship, like lying, your brain doesn't evaluate the lie neutrally. It searches for a way to protect the bond. It looks for context. It looks for excuses. It looks for a version of events where the relationship can survive. This isn't weakness. It's an ancient mechanism doing exactly what it was built to do. And it's extremely good at its job. But there's a second layer to this, something even more specific to repeated lying. Psychologists call it the sunk cost of emotional investment. Every time you forgive someone, every time you give them another chance, you're not just deciding about that moment. You're adding to a total, weeks, months, sometimes years of belief, hope, and emotional energy poured into this person. The more you've invested, the harder it becomes to accept that the investment might have been wrong. Think about what that actually means. If you admit, right now, that this person cannot be trusted, you're not just facing one lie. You're facing the possibility that every previous forgiveness, every benefit of the doubt, every moment you defended them to someone else, all of it was misplaced. That's an enormous psychological cost. And your brain, quite literally, would rather protect you from that realization than force you to confront it. So you find one more reason to believe them, and the cycle continues. There's also something happening at a neurological level that makes this even harder to escape. Studies on attachment and betrayal have found that when someone were bonded to lies to us, the brain regions associated with pain and threat activate. Similar to physical injury, the anterior insula lights up, the amygdala goes on alert, you feel genuinely unsafe. But here's the twist. The moment that same person shows affection, apology, or reassurance afterward, the brain's reward system activates just as strongly. Dopamine releases. The nucleus accumbens activates. You feel relief, safety, connection. This creates something close to an addictive loop. Pain, followed by relief. Threat, followed by resolution. Over time, your nervous system doesn't just tolerate this pattern, it starts to expect it. The lie becomes less shocking each time, because your brain has already learned what typically comes next. The apology, the explanation, the temporary peace. This is why people often describe staying in these situations as feeling like they can't fully leave, even when they know intellectually that they should. It's not a character flaw. It's your nervous system running a loop it was never designed to escape easily. Now here's where this becomes even more complicated, because trust after repeated lying isn't just about the liar. It's about what that person represents to you. Sometimes the person lying to you occupies a role your identity depends on: a parent, a long-term partner, a best friend, someone who has been present for years of your life. Losing trust in them doesn't just mean losing trust in one relationship. It can mean losing a piece of how you understand your own history, your family, your sense of stability. Your brain will fight extremely hard to avoid that kind of loss. Not because you're naive, because the alternative feels like losing part of yourself. This is where we arrive at something uncomfortable, something worth sitting with honestly. The ability to keep trusting someone who repeatedly lies isn't a flaw unique to certain people. It's not a sign of weakness or stupidity. It's one of the most human things about us. The same mechanism that lets you extend forgiveness to a lying partner is the mechanism that let ancient humans repair fractured alliances, forgive members of their tribe, and hold groups together through betrayal instead of fracturing every time someone made a mistake. But that same mechanism, when aimed at someone who has no intention of changing, becomes a trap instead of a strength. So what breaks the cycle? Research on trust repair suggests it isn't logic alone. Realizing intellectually that someone is untrustworthy rarely changes behavior on its own, because the attachment system doesn't respond to logic. It responds to safety. The cycle typically breaks when the emotional cost of staying finally outweighs the emotional cost of leaving. Not before, not gradually, but at a specific moment when something shifts. This is why people often describe the moment they finally stop trusting someone, not as a sudden realization, but as an exhaustion, a quiet, internal shift where the story they'd been telling themselves simply stops working anymore. They don't leave because they stopped loving. They leave because the nervous system finally accepts that this person is not safe. Here's the deeper truth this question was always circling. You don't keep trusting people who lie to you because you're foolish. You keep trusting them because somewhere in your nervous system, a very old, very powerful system is still trying to protect a bond it believes you need to survive. It doesn't know the difference between an ancient ally and a modern liar. It only knows one thing. Once someone becomes part of your safety, letting them go feels like danger, and your brain will do almost anything to avoid that sensation. Understanding that doesn't excuse someone's dishonesty, but it might explain something about yourself that felt confusing for a long time. You weren't simply being deceived. You were being human, in one of the oldest and most complicated ways there is.